So I had a question from someone about the Anaretic degree in astrology and what that means. And the answer to that question is very much it depends. There, the first thing that you need to look at with any planet is its dignity in the sign that it's in. So if it's Mars in Scorpio and it's in the last degree, and it's headed out into into Sagittarius. This is still going to be a very powerful Mars, but there's going to be a sense of falling away as it loses its dignity. Um, to further look at that, if it's a planet that's in a sign that it does fairly well in, but and it's about to leave, but that last part of the sign is its decan. If it rules the decan, then it's going to have a certain power there. If that sign is a mutable sign, meaning that the planet is in the 29th degree of a mutable sign, and it means we're about to change seasons, and that is usually quite problematic. And I get that from all of the decans that are the final decans of any mutable sign. It's always problematic because ancient people thought of the seasons as basically being having their own spirit. They had their own god that was birthed on the when the sun goes into the new cardinal sign upon the equinox or the solstice. That's basically the birth of a new deity, which means one dies basically at the end of the mutable sign. So there's this sense of falling away, of loss, especially at those places. I could go over all of the decans that end seasons, and they're all problematic. So that the general thing is you need to look at the dignity of that planet in the sign that it's in, and look at the dignity in the sign that it's going to. So another example would be if you had Venus in the Anaretic degree of Aries. That would be an interesting thing because Venus there is in detriment, but Venus there is also in its decan. It rules that decan. So Venus has a certain power there. She rules that decan with Jupiter, so it's a remarkably positive and artistic and uplifting decan, given that it's in Aries, which is obviously a pretty conflicted, and also very oriented towards new growth area. It's got the vibe of the season, but Venus falls there because of this sort of conflicted and emergent energy when she likes to stabilize and harmonize things. So Venus in the 29th degree of Aries is about to, unless she's going backwards, if she's retrograding out of Taurus and going into Aries, this is not going to be very happy. Venus. Venus in general in retrograde is flips from being a benefic planet to being malefic, effectively for the purposes of reading charts. And that's pretty much always true, even if she's got a high dignity. If she's going backwards, it's going to negatively impact the way things work out. But if she's going forwards and she's about to go into Taurus, there's a very a sense of that things are looking up. She has that decanic dignity from from Aries, and she's also like, woohoo, we're about to, cross the line. So there might be a fair amount of energy for a Venus in at that point. So this also does really depend on which planet it is. If it's a outer planet and it's retrograde, it doesn't generally matter. If it's when I say the outer planets, I actually don't mean Mars there. I mean Jupiter or Saturn, or the outer planets, the ones that you can't see. Mars also is not happy when he's going backwards. Generally, that's often a problematic one. So if you have, especially Mars, like retrograding into Cancer and the 29th degree, that's generally not a very happy Mars. And the other thing you can look at is the bound or terms that the planet's in. So if a planet happens to be at the end of a sign and it's also in its terms or bound, that's going to it gives it the ability to make the rules, essentially, or kind of enforce the rules. Even if it doesn't rule the sign, it's going to have a certain amount of power there. So yeah, you always look at dignity. You always look at where they're coming from and where they're going. It does matter if it's a retrograde, especially to the inner planets. Mercury, I would say it does matter, but not necessarily as much as Venus. Mercury's not going to flip to being malefic. Mars certainly doesn't become benefic. So the reading charts is a little bit different than the more esoteric meanings that I use often when I'm talking about the planets in the sort of cosmological sense, and using the doctrine of sect, that I often speak about things in those terms, which are sort of separate, but not entirely. Those things can matter. If we're talking about Saturn in the summertime, generally that's, at the Anaretic degree, he's already kind of irrelevant in terms of the season. He's just kind of subversive in a lot of signs. If you have Saturn in the 29th degree, particularly of Taurus, it's going to be, he double rules that decan. It's a Saturn decan, so that gives him a lot of power. So I would always look at the things you can know. Also, triplicity does the planet have triplicity there? And if you don't know the triplicities, that's members of the day sect, which are the Sun and Jupiter and Saturn. They gain a boost anytime they're in a fire or air sign, with the exception of the Sun, which is only air. The Sun only has triplicity in fire. It does not have. I think I misspoke there. The Sun only has this triplicity in fire. It does not have triplicity in air, but the Sun and the Saturn and Jupiter both have a triplicity boost in fire or air signs. And the night sect, they all have a boost from being in a water or a earth sign. Mars and Venus and Moon are all assisted by those things. So, and there's a few other Hellenistic rules or sort of get out of jail kind of things that can provide a boost. And I'm speaking specifically about the Moon in Jupiter ruled signs, where she gets a certain amount of protection. She can't be what's called void of course. The Moon cannot be, she gets a dignity boost essentially from being in Sagittarius or Pisces. And then, of course, there's exaltations. So that's the other, you have to take that into account. But generally, when you're looking at something changing, there's a problem. Astrology generally, when we have a change of season, especially, but a change of sign too is a any kind of change is uncomfortable. So there's going to be a sense in the astrological language of generally that the anaretic degree is problematic. Um, the word anaretic is an interesting one. You can't find much about that word except for if you like Google what's the anaretic degree mean, and then you'll get a bunch of generally standard gobbledygook from websites that are modern and kind of uh, not particularly based in tradition. Some of them can be good, but generally, if they get it right, uh, it's a roll of the dice, I think. The term itself, I've seen it defined as coming from the Greek meaning of high virtue. So there may be some sort of sense of having graduated from this particular set of challenges that this sign presents, like it's matriculating into the next thing. But again, it's like, what was it, a crappy lesson that they got from sitting in, retrograding into places that they were in fall or in detriment, and um, if they're about to enter that, then that's like, geez, that's not good. But if they're leaving and they're moving on to something better for their dignity and something that they can work with more. If you got Mars is leaving Gemini for Cancer, you've got he gets triplicity in Cancer, but he also falls there. So that's a case where he's gaining something, but he's losing something more. This is a very it's a nuanced thing. So if anybody wants to have me read their chart, I can absolutely do that, and we can talk that through exactly what's up with a particular planet that's in the 29th degree. So this is the reality of astrology is pretty kind of messy. It's like you got to follow all the rules and then some, essentially. And there's secondary, if you really get into this, you got to start looking at how is the ruler of that sign that they're in the 29th degree of, is that planet who rules that territory in good shape. So if you're, again, back in the Aries situation, if you got Venus in Aries in the 29th degree, and at the time that Venus is there, Mars is, say, in Gemini, in a place where he's got no dignity. That gives you a sextile by sign. If Mars can see into Aries from Gemini, that gives Venus particularly a certain amount of support, potentially. But the if you have Mars then in like a superior square to Venus, then that would be Mars in Capricorn, and technically Mars is in a good position to support Venus, but that's a bad angle. That's a bad angle, so that Mars is kind of competing with Venus there. So can support Venus from Capricorn, but also it kind of puts him in an argument with Venus there. So she's not only in his territory, and he doesn't want her to like mess the place up, so he's not gonna like throw fireballs at her necessarily, But you got to see that it's like he's advocating for earth and she's advocating for fire. They kind of have to put on the clothes of the sign that they're wearing. Um, so I hope that helps. There's always more to say about any particular placement. If the, as I said, if the ruler of the sign that you're in the Anaretic degree and the ruler is in good shape, then fantastic. That might help. If the ruler is like really in bad shape, and that also includes being like in accidental dignity, which means that the planet, if the ruler um, of a sign is in the 12th house or the 6th house or the 8th house, um, that there's a good chance that that planet is not that ruler planet is not spectacularly capable. It's kind of busy doing busy work, like taking out the garbage, cleaning the house, tending to making sure the kitty litter is fresh, all that kind of stuff that you get in the 6th house, or worrying about invisible enemies in the 12th, or like there's astrology is there's so many indicators, but I hope this helps. It's a um, yeah, it's a complicated thing. Again, the 29th degree, leaving change, not generally a positive thing as far as astrological parlance goes, but you know that's what I can say.